Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Connect Conversations. Today's conversation is all about performance measurement principles, and it's brought to you as a part of Mobius Connect's ongoing YouTube series, Connect Conversations. I'm Kim Fugger, the manager of Mobius Connect, and I will be your moderator for today's session. First, I'd like to take a moment to introduce our hosts of Connect Conversations series, Global Reliability Improvement experts Doug Plucknett and Ron Moore. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hey.
Well, before I pass the microphone officially over to you guys, I want to encourage our audience here today to submit any questions that you do have in your chat function. We will be answering your questions on air. Again, you will be not called out for them, so please enter any of your questions. Ron and Doug do have time, and during their conversations, we'll be very happy to answer any of them. All right, Doug and Ron, I'm going to go ahead and pass things over to you now.
Okay. Hey, everybody, and welcome. We're going to be talking about performance measurement today, and I'm going to be focused on some principles. I won't necessarily tell you what to measure. I'll give you some examples, but what are some of the principles that you need to apply? And, one of the first ones is, why are you measuring that, whatever that is? What's your purpose, what's your objective, and what measures, support that? And I think, Doug, you jump in here if I'm wrong. You're going to talk about using performance measures to do performance management.
Exactly.
And some of the principles behind that. And there's a little bit of interplay between the two, but that's kind of what we're going to try to do today. I'll maybe start with some performance measurement principles, and then we'll come back and Doug will talk about performance management, and then I'll articulate a little bit more on the details underlying each of the so-called principles. Okay, the first, besides figuring out why you're measuring it and what your objective and how that measure supports it, the next principle is that your performance measures should expose your weaknesses relative to those objectives. And for example, I think OEE is a good measurement to expose your weaknesses, that is, your opportunities for improvement. Another one is that they should facilitate collaboration. Too often I see in these organizations where, Doug might be responsible for one set of measures and I'm responsible for another, and those measures are very often in conflict. And when they're in conflict, the system doesn't do very well. That is, the performance of the organization doesn't do well when we're operating in conflict. And so there needs to be some attention given to that. They should matter, and Doug will get more into making them matter with performance management. That is, they should be used to drive behavior, and if they don't, then maybe you got the wrong measures. Should be limited to our span of control. I've been in plants where they'd have 25 measures up on a board. Well, to me, that's just useless. Everybody ignores it because it's too busy, it's too complex. You can't get a whole lot of focus on that. Now, they should cascade maybe down to the shop floor, but there ought to be at the site level 4 or 5 really key measures, and then when they're in departments, certain measures. But I would limit it to just a few that you can actually manage. And they ought to be visible and current. They ought to be out there so people can see them. And kept current. That's a really important point. I've been in operations where you walk by and there's a set of measures on a board somewhere, and you look up and it says, June 21. Well, wait a minute, it's April 22. Well, what good is that? That just tells people you just don't care about the measures because you don't keep them current. And then I mentioned this earlier, they should cascade, pick 5, but then maybe below those 5, there are 2 or 3 more for each one. And then maybe below that, there are more. So those are, some of the key performance measurement principles that I try to give a lot of attention to. All right, I'll pass it over to Doug and let him yammer on a bit about performance measurement and management.
All right. So I'm a person that, initially when I worked as a tradesperson and a lead person and a supervisor, and I was often frustrated by the things that we measured were
Useless.
sometimes it was just irrelevant. Let's put it that way, right? They were lagging indicators as opposed to leading indicators. And it was one of those things that exposed when I was a lead person to performance management and Aubrey Daniels and his thoughts on measurement and working in a manufacturing environment. And he was the person that said, you should really need to focus on his behaviors. What are people's behaviors? What are the behaviors that drive positive results, right? And he talked about this ABC method, antecedents, behaviors, and consequences. And so in learning that, it was one of those things that kind of opened my eyes. You talked about OEE, for example. OEE is, it's a fantastic measure. It is, however, it's a lagging indicator. What do I do to impact OEE? What do I need to do to change to make that OEE improve as opposed to stay flat or decline? And it's something that you and I talk about all the time, eliminate defects, right?
Yep.
So one of the measures would be defects identified. Another one be defects eliminated, right? And in looking at those two, the end result should be sometime down the road, not immediately, but a positive change in OEE. And so that's one of the things that I've always tried to get organizations that I work with to focus on. What are the behaviors that drive the results that you're looking for, right? If you're looking to improve your safety record, right? What do I need to do to improve that safety record? Well, we need to talk about safety. We need to make safety a focus as part of our everyday work, right? So what are some of the measures I can do that are proactive or leading indicators that would facilitate better results in terms of safety? So let's start looking and viewing it, our work that way.
Yeah, just to interject here, having leading indicators and lagging indicators, and you just hit on it, and that is if you focus on lagging indicators, and most companies do, right? They are really good at doing lagging indicators, but that's what's already happened. The old wag about it's like looking in the rear view mirror to see where you're going. It doesn't work very well. So what are the leading indicators so that you get the right results? And having that balance right, I think is really, really critical. I agree with you. OEE is a lagging indicator. The components within OEE, if you break them down into a little more detail, those are leading indicators, or they can be if they're structured right. Anyways, back to you, Doug.
Yeah, I did want to comment on your statement about looking at the charts and seeing June 2021 is the last one posted. I was at a place where it wasn't quite that bad, but it was 3 or 4 months difference. And I asked what's going on with the measures? How come they're not being kept up to date? And one of the guys in the meeting said, that's the last time we got yelled at. When we get yelled at, they put them up.
Yeah. Well, back in the long time ago when I was president of CSI, each one of my managers that reported to me had, 4, 5, or 6 measures that they posted outside their office. And, once a week I'd do a walk around, and if their measures weren't current, they got interrupted and told to make them current. So the point being, if management doesn't care enough to provide the energy, the resources, facilitate, and make sure it's understood that it's important, then, nobody's going to care. But that's got to be balanced against what the shop floor needs. So anyway, back to you there.
All right. So I talked a little bit about this ABC model, which is antecedents, behaviors, and consequences. Antecedents really are what are the conditions that drive or motivate employees to be engaged? And this is things like trust, positive reinforcement from leaders. So that's recognition, opportunity or career growth, which is can also even be opportunity, can be training, right? People are motivated by learning more sometimes. And again, that recognition, whether recognition is through simply positive reinforcement, saying thanks for the good job, or promotions, or a change in base pay, those things are and can be antecedents. The B part of this is behaviors. So what are the behaviors that drive the results that we look for? So an antecedent typically triggers a behavior, and those behaviors are engaged employees. Employees that are engaged tend to want the process that you're working with to do better. They want it to improve continuously. Open communication is another one, a behavior that you're looking for. So can you measure that? What are forms of open communication? Those are one-on-one meetings. Those are group meetings. Those are daily meetings in terms of the process and workload. All those forms of communication, if we do those on a regular basis, should result in behaviors that would improve our process down the road. A safe work environment is a behavior that motivates people. If you don't think that's true, go visit a place that's struggling with safety and see how the employees react. There's a world of difference between employees that work for a place that's safe and employees that work for a place that is just a disaster. I mean, I've been at one recently where I bet in walking down their equipment, at least 30% of the guards on rotating equipment are either missing or damaged in a way that people are exposed to that, right? It's filthy. There's stuff all over the place. And the folks that work there, if you start talking to them about continuous improvement, they just kind of give you those high eyes, like, oh gosh, here we go. You know, another one of these people preaching this to us. Let me tell you something, mister. All we do here is fight fires, right? If you want that environment to change, you have to focus on making that work environment one that's desirable to come to work in.
Yeah, one of the things, just to interject a little bit on this, the employee engagement, it's really important that you facilitate structured improvement time.
Absolutely.
You know, once a week, once a month, you take a half a day or a day, or maybe it's just as needed, but it needs to be frequent enough so that people expect it and they look for it. And you put together a cross-functional team, and you go to the guys and you say, hey, this machine is not right. We're going to clean it. We're going to find the defects. We're going to restore it to like new condition. Or this procedure, you know, maybe it's the permitting process sucks. We're going to put our heads together. We're going to come up with an improved process or a solution to this, and then we're going to implement it. And after they implement it, you say, wow, good job. What's next? And it's just something that is ongoing, you know, forever. And too often, you know, people will do, you know, one job and everything worked, and they, okay, got that problem solved. Now let's go back to how we used to do it. You know, and you really need to have structured improvement time that's on a continuing basis. So,
and that was actually my fourth bullet point on behaviors, and that is continuous improvement, eliminating defects.
you
That
dropped
really
off, Doug.
it motivates people, right? Making things, improving things at work is a motivator for people, right? When
Yeah.
you change something like that and they fix it and that problem goes away, right? It's a confidence builder, right? It's one of those things that, and it will multiply on itself. You'll see people in that work group, it'll almost become competitive to say, what's the next thing we can fix? What's the next problem that we can make go away, right? And when you get that kind of synergy going, it's powerful. There's, I can't overstate how powerful it is. I can tell you that sadly enough, it's also sometimes rare because, just as Ron said, they don't have the discipline to take that time, whether it's weekly or daily, to actually discuss those things, right? To
Yeah.
actually sit down with the operators and say, what are the defects or problems that your issues that you're having with this equipment? To do the same with the maintenance crew, right? And to
Yeah.
document those things and say, okay, who's got some ideas around what's going on here? And it can start with, just as you said, something as simple as a Kaizen event. Let's take a day and, go through this thing and clean it like it looks when it was brand new, right?
Yeah.
And we'll get that thing cleaned up. We'll, retime it or whatever else might need to be done with it that day. And in doing so, we'll find some other defects by doing that, right? And we'll eliminate those. It's a powerful thing to get people working together on those types of things and making those problems go away and then sustaining it. That's also important. All right.
Yeah, that approach is also critical when you're trying to manage so-called cultural change.
Yeah.
People don't want to be changed. They don't want to have stuff jammed down their throat. But if you work with them, get their ideas, get them involved in doing some of these leading indicator things, then they'll have a sense of purpose, a sense of ownership, sense of control. And when you give that to them and it solves their day-to-day problems, then you're going to get changes in the culture, in the behavior of the people. But it has to be done repeatedly and, in effect, 21 times, so that it becomes a new way of doing business, a new habit, and it becomes expected. So anyway, so you had, what's the next consequences on yours? Now I want to go back to my list and talk a little bit more about those.
Go right ahead.
Oh, you don't want to talk about consequences first?
I will. Yes, I will. All right. So
Okay.
the final and
All right.
ABC is the consequence piece of this. How do we ensure that the behaviors that we desire will actually continue? And number one in that is called positive reinforcement. That provides motivation to continue. Positive, immediate, certain reinforcement. When people do the right things, recognize them for doing those things, right? That recognition means a lot. And that has to be consistent, right? You can't do it one day and not the next. Be thankful for when people do the right things and make sure they know they're recognized for doing so. All right, negative reinforcement. This is people often confuse this for punishment or a butt chewing. And negative reinforcement is actually taking away something that negatively impacts performance. A safety hazard, for example, right? Negative reinforcement is getting rid of something that makes people's work life more difficult. And those things it can be the way a machine is set up or the way we stack incoming products. So it's those types of things. Doing those is actually reinforcing for people. All right. The third type of consequence is punishment, and punishment is really one of those things that you say there should be 25 positive reinforcements to every punishment if there was a rule. And I'm not a counter like that. I'm a person that just says you use punishment when you need to, and punishment is for when somebody is blatantly performing a behavior they know is incorrect. Right. So think of how often that is.
You coach them, you counsel them, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, I've had coaches that coached me.
And the last method is extinction. And that's really ignoring some of those behaviors that you would like to go away. Right. And I struggle often with examples of that one, but I remember taking and going through the course. They went through 5 or 6 examples of this, and every one they gave, I was kind of confused about why would you ignore that? Well, somebody takes a little extra long break time. All right. Why would you ignore that? Because it's not every day. It's something that on a rare occasion they do. should you say something to that person, or should you ignore that behavior, knowing that, well, it's not what I want to see. It's not often enough to recognize.
Yeah.
I can't think of any others off the top of my head, but that's the one that always stuck out to me. And then when it was explained to me that way, it was like, okay, I guess that makes sense, right? If it's every day, then it would be something that, yes, you need to recognize that, and there should be some punishment behind that for doing so if the behavior doesn't change. So,
Yeah, or at least a cautionary word to whoever it is. You know, I think most people respond to what positive criticism, I guess you might call it. You know,
yeah,
if people know you're looking, they will do better, and you're letting them know that you're looking. So, in a and I don't do it in a jerkwad fashion. Do it in a positive sense. Hey, I need you to be back on time. It's important to the business, or something words to that effect.
right.
One of the was there a question? No. One of the Winston LeDay, Doug, I'm pretty sure you know him.
Yeah.
He's he made a comment one time. You got to make it easy for people to do the right thing, and you got to make it hard for them to do the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So whatever you do that makes it easier is good. And if they're doing the wrong thing, whatever you do that makes it more difficult to do that is the right thing. So anyways, that's just some thoughts. I want to jump back and, talk a little bit about exposing your weaknesses. We mentioned OEE, for example, but that needs to be broken down and then focus on eliminating the defects and managing the losses. And in the ideal state, your OEE would be 100%. Well, you're never going to get there. In fact, you shouldn't get there if you're going to do all those other things right, the manage the losses. But some others might be, for example, the ideal state for quality rejects, right? Ought to be 0. Or another way of thinking about it, ought to be 100%. So you're going to take that, you're going to identify the gaps, and you're going to start working on reducing the gaps that cause you to have non-quality. Another might be related to that, might be customer returns. What's ideal? 0. Well, how many are you getting? Why are you getting those? What are you going to do to manage those out? So another one might be injuries. What's ideal? 0. Where are you? What's the gap? What are you going to do about those, those gaps? So, pick 4 or 5 measures. The ideal state would be whatever it is, 100 or 0 or whatever it may be, and then focus on managing and reducing the difference between the ideal state and where you are. So that's, exposing your weaknesses. Okay. Facilitating collaboration. We mentioned this earlier. If we're in different departments held accountable for different measures, and those measures are in conflict, then we're going to run into a big problem. So just a couple examples there. If I were in charge of an organization, for example, I would have the maintenance manager and the stores manager both responsible for stock out rate, service levels, another word for that, and the consequence of that, and for inventory levels or inventory turns, because those are very often at odds.
Yeah.
If you want 0 stock outs, just have a spare plant in your storeroom. Well, that's not going to happen. Or if you want 0 inventory, then don't carry any stock, and your stock out rate will go through the roof. So having those 2 functions responsible for both numbers, forces some sort of accommodation and doing what's right for the business as a whole. And likewise, for example, production and maintenance, I would hold both production manager and maintenance manager responsible for maintenance and repair costs, for maintenance schedule compliance, and for production schedule compliance. so that,
I chuckle
know,
at that one because that's one I just reviewed with that same customer and said that to the operations management, I don't see maintenance schedule compliance on your measures. And he says that's not my measure. That's their measure. And I said, oh no, that's your measure. Right.
yeah,
And he looked at me confused and I said, you're the person that either allows or doesn't allow maintenance to do work. Am I correct? And he said, yeah. I said, then you own it.
yep,
Right. That's your measure. Right.
yep,
And
or
he said,
vice
so,
versa.
so you tell me that the maintenance manager, it shouldn't be on his measure too. I said, yeah, I have no problem with him having that as a measure, but it should be your measure. Right. And
as well.
he
So, and and vice versa, if the maintenance manager is insistent on doing maintenance when there's a critical production run that needs to be delivered to keep a key customer, then you need to step back and say, whoa, well,
exactly. Yeah.
maybe I should, defer
Yeah.
on this
Yeah.
occasion and to, do what's right for the business. And the maintenance and repair costs, both parties are inducing defects in the process. So both parties ought to be held accountable for the costs that go with that. And anyways, so, and there are others that you could come up with, along capital projects, for example, having, those guys are responsible for unit cost of production and unplanned downtime and changeover times, because how they design for ease of operation and ease of maintenance will impact those issues. So it's just a matter of trying to make sure that, you balance those competing interests and get folks to collaborate on doing what's right for the business as a whole, not just necessarily their own department. And there'll be some things they do independent of each other, and that's okay. But there's some key measures, and you get to decide what those are, where you need to work in a collaborative fashion to make sure you do what's right for the business as a whole. They should matter, be used to drive behavior. Well, we've talked a little bit about that. Limited to our span of control. We've touched on that. Don't use more than notionally about 5. Now, the right balance of leading and lagging indicators. Now, we sort of touched on that, but I wanted to throw out some examples. For example, and this is mostly in manufacturing, and you guys out there who are not in manufacturing might want to think of something else. But, one of them, leading indicator, are you doing the right things, would be operator care, or if they do PMs, and I think they ought to do some simple ones, conformance. So are they doing that? Are they taking care of the equipment? Another one might be process conformance. Are we holding the key process variables within the upper and lower control limits? And if not, are we measuring that and trying to manage it to minimize the risk of that happening? Number of alarms, disabled alarms. And what are we going to do to reduce the number of alarms? What are we going to do to minimize the number of times we disable alarms? And yes, sometimes that'll require some engineering support. But if we get the folks involved in some of this, they're going to be much more attuned to having a sense of ownership, purpose, control, that sort of thing. Another one might be the number of spills, loss of containment. How often does that happen? And what's the consequence of that? And what can we do to minimize that? Another one might, literally be equipment downtime. That's more of a traditional maintenance one, but the production guys very often induce more downtime than do the maintenance guys, either by virtue of, short stops and product changeovers and, literally damaging the equipment so it fails. So what can we do about that? Another one might be housekeeping conformance, or first pass, first quality yield. And the point of this is that it's measures that they have some direct control or influence over, that you put the systems in place that allows them to exert more influence, more control over those in such manner as they improve, they get better. Now, some on the maintenance side, and there are others. I mean, I don't mean to limit folks, but there are others that you may find more suited to your particular organization based on your requirements and your needs. On the maintenance side might be, PM compliance, maintenance schedule compliance, that sort of thing. Might be percent of equipment that is aligned and balanced. Well, ideally it'd be 100%. So if it's not, then why not? Another one might be seal life, or number of seals used per month, or number of bearings used per month, or leaks, number of leaks. And again, all these are things that the maintenance staff or the operating staff have direct influence and control and knowledge about. Because if you can address those issues, all the lagging indicators, they're going to get better almost automatically. So I think it's real important that people give more attention to the leading indicators so that the lagging indicators get better.
Yeah.
So that's some thoughts on that. Doug, you got?
I can tell you that when I'm working with folks in chemical plants, I often will see the measure of spills, and I recommend to them, I would prefer you measure leaks, right? And you get that funny look. What do you mean? I said, well, I've worked in places that when they started out, and this is, understand, 40 years ago, a spill was 5 gallons, right? And then 5 years after that, it became a gallon. And then 5 years after that, it became a quart. And then we finally got smart and we just decided to measure leaks, right? And when we started measuring leaks, guess what happened to the number of spills? It went down drastically, right? Every leak is a spill. That's the way we looked at it, right? And when you finally start addressing leaks as opposed to spills, your spills will go way down, because leaks in themselves are unacceptable, right?
Well, I've got a war story about something that very similar, Doug. There's a chemical plant in Asia, in Malaysia, actually. And, we had a lot of leaks, and a real simple tool that was used, the engineering manager, a good friend of mine, he said, he picked 2 guys, competent guys who cared and were diligent and all that sort of thing. He said, I want you to go find all the leaks and tag them with a bright pink tag with the date you found it. And then I want you to enter that into the system.
Yeah.
And the place looked like a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
I mean, there were 150 or 200 leaks, right? And then they said, okay, now I want you to put a plan together for how we're going to eliminate all those leaks. And they went from 150 to, I don't know, 5 or 10 or something like that. Over the course, took them several months, but over the course of a few months, they managed to get the leaks down to something that was, manageable, that was within the context of, you're going to have, a few leaks created from time to time, and they got them down to a very manageable level. So it was a real simple tool to manage the leaks. You find them, you tag them, you put them in the system, and then you manage them out of the system.
Yeah.
And they had a chart, here's this month we had this many, then this many, then this many. And you could see over a few months, they went down to near zero. So it's just a question of getting the folks involved in doing the work and holding them accountable with some measures. And then when they do a good job, thank them, give them some sort of reward. Doesn't have to be money, but money always is appreciated, and involve them in doing all the little things right, so the big bad things don't happen. So, that's my little war story. Are we? Well, shoot, we might finish early today, Doug. I don't really have.
Yeah, we could, and that's the thing. We could talk a lot about different measures, but it comes down to your organization. And do as Ron said, focus on, get that balance between the proactive things or the leading and lagging indicators, that's the biggest part of this. And use measures that are meaningful to people. If you just the stories of the leaks that you and I both told, if you can do something like that, the change in the culture that brings about is remarkable.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
it,
another one, we just started counting the number of seal failures per month.
yeah,
We brought in a seal expert and got all the guys on the floor trained in installing and operating seals, different kinds of seals under different circumstances. And seal failures per month went from whatever it was, I don't remember now, 20 or 30 down to 1 or 2. It's just a lot of those little things that the leverage, if you got 500 people at a plant, the leverage is not per se in me or you. The leverage is in engaging the entire workforce in defect elimination. Now that leverage has to come from senior management who puts in place the processes and the principles and provides the improvement time for folks to actually go do that, that structured improvement time. And if you do that, you're going to get better.
all right. So if we don't see any questions, Ron, there's no point in carrying on and telling more war stories. But it's been great chatting with you again.
Yeah, likewise. And I've got a beaucoup measures. One comment I will give you, I think Ramesh Gulati, he's got a book out there on, I think it's called Maintenance Best Practices, GULATI, that has a truckload of measures. So if you want to know and want to, go out and look for measures and determine whether or not you ought to have those, you can look at those. And of course, my book, I've got a lot of benchmark data. I don't know, there's about 100 benchmark measures in there. Well, maybe not that many, but enough to overwhelm you. So if you want to know specific measures and where you are, then, they're in there, but pick 4 or 5 at the executive level and then pick 3 or 4 that support each one of those and let it cascade down.
Yeah.
So,
One person always says that, if you're a manager, no more than 5. Just take that handful. Yep. If you got more than that, you're probably wasting your time and you're looking at stuff that isn't going to be that important anyway. So stick with that handful and be consistent with them. And again, it's a thing of staying active, right? What can I do? What direction should this be going in? And what can we do in terms of behaviors to change that measure?
Yeah. Yep. Well, I just wrap up. I'll tell you what I told you at the beginning. And when I was in the Army, that's what I tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So I'll tell you what I told you at the beginning. Your measurement should expose your weaknesses so you can improve them. They should facilitate collaboration, not conflict, which means very often they need to be shared amongst functional groups. They should matter. They should be used to drive behavior. They should be limited to your span of control. Doug put up that 5 number. Should be visible and current. And they should have the right balance of leading and lagging indicators, and give a whole lot more emphasis to the leading indicators if you want the lagging indicators to get better. So there you go.
All right. Well, Fran, have a great day. I'm not sure if Kim is listening. I hope she is, because we're about ready to sign off. Kim, are you there?
I am. Of course I am.
All right.
Well, thank you both for another great conversation and session. On behalf of our entire team here at Mobius Connect, thank you to our wonderful audience for joining us too. Just as a quick reminder, you can see all past episodes of Connect Conversations on YouTube at Mobius Connect. And be on the lookout in the next 2 weeks. We will be having employee engagement next up at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you are interested in engaging with other industry professionals or would like to participate in the industry's live feed and forums on Mobius Connect, please visit www.mobiusconnect.com to create your free profile, and be sure to follow us on social media at Mobius Connect to stay up to date with the latest community happenings. If you do have any questions at all or would like to get into contact with Doug or Ron, please email our team at info@mobiusconnect.com. Thanks again for joining us. Have a great day, stay safe, and we will see you guys next time.